with Bill number 118. And we all have received copies of 38. So we would revert right back up to Bill number 38-31. And I recognize the sponsor, Senator Palacios.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, first, upon consultation, of course, with the chairman of the committee that heard the bill, the committee reported out the original bill, and I would like to make a motion to accept the Bill 38 as amended by the author, which has actually been passed out. I don't know, is that the language or as amended on the floor or a substitute bill?
Okay, so you're asking then to accept, the motion to accept Bill 38 as amended by the author?
Yes, and this would reflect all the markup and those things so that...
So on the motion to accept, no objection, so ordered. Your
If I
motion
may
then?
present. Madam Speaker, I also attached to this amended bill.
Motion to place?
I move that the Bill 38 as amended by the author be placed on third reading file for purpose of discussion, and if I may be allowed, ma'am, to
Yes,
make
Senator.
presentation. I attached to this amended version, of course, just a brief notation on the markup where the changes occur, and essentially in the insertion of operator's license, Class A endorsement, or to that effect is actually what's inserted there where it pertains to the charges, because there's already a current provision that allow for the charging for commercial licensing of hours road tests and proficiency tests. And again, for the authority to charge for operators. So that's actually where the amendment occur. Again, Madam Speaker, this is the product of work between my office with the Department of Revenue and Taxation, back and forth, and then I gave them the updated version with their feedback, and this is the product of that at least 2 or 3 meetings. And again, essentially, the Bill 38 as amended, the intention is to alleviate, of course, the tremendous backlog now that exists in a long waiting period of anywhere from 4 to 6 months, ma'am, to have the written test after passage of it takes 4 to 6 months to have the driving test after passage of the written test. There's no problem with the written test. Right now, written tests, there's an MOU with DRT and UOG that the UOG conducts a lot of this. And between UOG and Revenue and Taxation, they're able, of course, to maintain this on current level. So the product of this, of course, the end result is that the waiting period for the driving test and the Department of Revenue and Tax testified that the operator's driver's license is on highest demand. It is actually the basic licensing to operate a passenger vehicle. Anybody that's old enough, that would be the first licensing actually, and no wonder, it's I think the maturity of our population attaining 18 years of age, the transient population, FSM and dependents, military personnel come here, they would need those, and that's why the demand is there. Currently, Madam Speaker, there are 4 examiners plus 1 supervisor. The 4 examiners administering chauffeur's license, both written and proficiency, operator's license, and motorcycle license. And among the 4, of course, for the chauffeur's license, there's already a current provision which this body implemented almost 2 years ago that allow for the administration of the road test or proficiency test for commercial licensing, and this is in response to the request by trucking companies for the long delay of prospective employees that applied, but for whom cannot be employed unless they have a chauffeur's license. And there was a premium fee, of course, that the company is willing to pay. I understand we set it at $275. But the administration of that test lasts from 4 to 6 hours, from 4 to 8 hours. And with the driver's license, according to the testimony of Revenue and Taxation, that's going to take anywhere from 15 minutes to 40 minutes to conduct 1 test per applicant. So in their estimate, they're able actually to cover, without difficulty, maybe 10 applicants. And calculating, of course, the the cost implication of this to the potential driver, the licensee, it's estimated, and I give here the breakdown, that if the person is of course earning $9.50 an hour, the first hour will be times 3, which is $28.50, and the remaining 7 hours would be calculated at time and a half, which is $99.75, for a total of $128.25. And if this is divided by 10 participants in an 8-hour block, which they say they can handle without difficulty, it actually translated to about $12.83 per applicant, per license, if you will. And so the cost will be spread out. And if one if one weekend, one person is activated to do this, he can actually cover at least minimum 8 to 10. And that would actually pay toward the cost of the applicant, which would cost him only a maximum of $15. It says here not more than $15. So according to revenue and taxation, when they develop the rules and regulations, they can actually probably maybe charge less than that, but it says there no more than $15. And it's going to go to the account that right now receives the charges for the commercial licensing, and it's going to be paid out of that account. Before this policy is implemented, Madam Speaker, the Revenue and Taxation must first establish rules and regulations to ensure proper implementation. There were, thoughts of about maybe potential abuse, that maybe what can be done during normal working hours can be set aside for weekends. The rules and regulations probably will be subject to the AAA process. We can look at it, and we can, provide input into that. And those are the things that were brought up. Identical bill was considered by the last legislature, but that bill did not make it to the floor in the December 2010 session. I remember that because the author of that bill happened to, at the moment, when we were caucusing for the last agenda for the session. He was of island, so there were questions and concerns, which actually I think the issue was there about the rate, the fee to be charged. And so that's why that was tabled. And of course, it became inactive. And this one is just actually more or less a resurrection of that bill, now with the cost implication and some other provisions. And I'd like to emphasize that the department director, the deputy director, and even Mr. Frank Blas that administered the motor vehicle division are in support of this. They welcome this, and they can see an immediate positive impact in reducing, assuming, Madam Speaker, that at least two revenue officers are activated at least one day on the weekend, maybe on a Saturday. They'll be able to cover 16 minimum up to 20. And imagine the accelerated lowering of this waiting period and people on the wait list. Again, currently there's no waiting time for the written tests, which are being conducted by both DRT and UOG. The problem actually is in the written test, Madam Speaker, and I ask my colleagues to support this with the input, of course, of Department of Revenue and Taxation, and I hope that, if there's any comment, we can make this a better bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, are there any speakers? So on the motion then to send Bill 38-31 to the voting file without any objection, so ordered. We left off and set aside substitute bill number 107. I recognize that the author. Okay, but maybe just an overview of what it is, so then we can get the discussion going. And if there's anyone who'd like to speak on the motion, please let me know.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill number 107-31 is substituted by the Committee on Health, Human Services, Economic Development, Senior Citizens, and Election Reform. It is an act that would add several new sections, but it's relative to the public disclosure of a physician's professional profile, which may be cited as a Patient Protection Through Information Act. And as we left off last night, Madam Speaker, there were several of my colleagues who wished to speak on it, and one of my colleagues said he probably was looking wanted to look at something and then work on an amendment if necessary. So I'd like to just ask the body again to work with me and support the efforts of this bill 107, bill number 107, a substitute that will really empower the patients through this act to have, empower them to have the protections and give them the awareness and the profile of what their physicians have, so, or what they've gone through. So I hope my colleagues support the efforts, and if they can help me support the bill, I would truly appreciate it. So, si Diyos masi, Madam Speaker.
On the motion, I think I had you down, Speaker Pangilinan, to speak.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of the intention of the bill and what it wants to do, and that is arm patients with the knowledge about how the physician that they may be seeing has conducted himself in the practice of his medical field. The couple of the things that I was kind of like uncertain about, number one, on page 1, where we have the language that says, beginning on line 6, that the board shall disclose to an inquiring member of the public and via the internet with the assistance of the Bureau of Information and Technology information regarding any enforcement actions. I don't know that we need to put in there that issue of via the internet with the assistance of Bureau Information Technology. I don't understand why that needs to be in the bill. I think we'll let DPW, Public Health and the boards figure out how the information will be disseminated. And to put in statute that it's via the internet and BIT has to be involved. You know, we're now getting the medical records being electronic and things of that nature. And I think coupled with those initiatives at Public Health, we may be able to provide this physician data network information, and it doesn't have to go through BIT and so forth. So while it may not be substantive, maybe I just think that it may be limiting in some respect. And so I would just make a motion to just delete that, and via the internet with the assistance of Bureau of Information Technology, and just say the members of the inquiring public information regarding any enforcement actions taken against a licensee, including a former licensee by the board of another state, etc.
On the amendment, Senator Munya Barnes, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I really don't have any major problems with that amendment, but I just thought that based on the mission mandate by BIT, the Bureau of Information Technology, that it was a part of their responsibility to help launch the website. So, I mean, like I said, just based on that information I have, that's why it's there, but I have no problems deleting that because it's already known.
Hearing no objections, so ordered. Senator, you still have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the other thing I'm really a little uncertain about is this issue of temporary restraining orders issued. Is it any kind of restraining order? Is it I have a dispute with my neighbor over our boundaries, or a doctor has a dispute with his neighbor over his boundaries, and the neighbor decides to say, you can't cross my property, I'm going to get a restraining order. Is that subject to the disclosure requirements? Or are we trying to, is it to be that broad, or is this meant, you know, against patients, against other doctors, against other health professionals associated with his conduct as a doctor or a health professional? I'm just not sure.
Would you like the senator to yield to your question?
Yeah, maybe that.
Senator Munya Barnes, do you yield?
Madam Speaker, if I may, based on the mirroring of the laws that were templated with the state of California, there was a list of all the, I guess, the inclusions of what needed to be done. And in this case, there may be instances where temporary restraining orders could be given by a court of law. And even if there is information to that effect, I just think that if a physician has a restraining order given to them for a specific reason, then there shouldn't be any cause for anyone else not to know about it. As a matter of fact, when restraining orders are given, it's usually there is a database that can be utilized here. So it was just being inclusive.
Speaker Pangilinan, are you satisfied with the response?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank the author for yielding to that. If you kind of go through the list of information that is disclosable, and you get to 6, and it says, civil judgments in any amount, whether or not vacated by a settlement after entry of a judgment, that are not reversed on appeal, and arbitration awards in any amount of a claim or action for damages for death, personal injury caused by the physician, negligence, error, omission, practice, or in his rendering of unauthorized professional services. Maybe what I would like to maybe suggest is that all of the issues listing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that we list those instances and then make them all subject to the physician and surgeons for damage, make them subject to the physician's or surgeon's negligence, error, or omission in practice, or by his or rendering unauthorized professional services, so that the revocations, suspensions, prohibitions, limitations on practice would be subject to that. The public letters of reprimands issued, again, public letters of reprimand for what? It should be public letters of reprimand caused by the physicians, imposed upon the physicians because of negligence, error, omission in practice, or by his or her rendering unauthorized professional services. So if I could maybe make that kind of general amendment for consideration by the body, that the type of information enumerated from 1 through 7 should be tied to the physician or surgeon's negligence, error, or omission in practice, or by his or her rendering unauthorized professional services. So that would be the general amendment that I would like to offer, Madam, and then allow the council to then craft the language that would make that applicable to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yes, we will take a recess to have that in writing. Session. Speaker
Madam
Pangilinan.
Speaker, thank you very much. I think we have a little bit simpler way of resolving our concern, and that would be on line 9,
On to what page?
page 1.
Okay.
On line 9, it says licensee, including a former licensee, by the board or by another state board, or licensing jurisdiction. So that even the temporary restraining order then would be based upon the license and their practice in that state. So that makes it very clear that those issues are related to the practice, because that
license.
board would have jurisdiction over their practice.
Okay.
So we to add by another state board or licensing jurisdiction, including all of the following.
Okay. So you, wait, but you're going to withdraw your other amendment?
Yes, I'm withdrawing my
So
other
on the
amendment.
withdrawal of the amendment, no objections are ordered. And then the new amendment is to add, after another state on line 9, the word licensing jurisdiction or licensing jurisdiction. Senator Munya Barnes? On line 9 where it says or, we're going to put down there another state or licensing jurisdiction. No objection? Okay. Do you would like to speak on it? Senator Rodriguez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of, first of the bill, but also on this amendment, because then we make it clear that what we disclose, the information we disclose on the physicians is directly related to their practice. Because I think, some of the concerns out there is that we may have physicians out there that have excellent record in their practice, but may have one or two infractions, that are not related to their practice that may jeopardize, their credibility, and really it doesn't have there's no bearing to what their performance is as a physician. So I rise in support of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the amendment? There being none, no objections, so ordered. Speaker Pangilinan, you still have the floor. Is there anything else? You're good. Anybody else? Senator Yamashita, you're recognized on the motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I believe I understand the intent of this bill, and that is to ensure that our community has access to information to know about the doctors, the physicians that we trust our health to. I wonder if, as I read this is to ensure that all the wrongdoings that a doctor has encountered is public and accessible. Madam Speaker, is there something to be said, as the title of this is Disclosure of Physician's Professional Profile, is there something to be said that we should also include the positive aspects of a physician? That we should show that what kind of research, what kind of discoveries, what kind of awards, what kind of civic contributions this doctor has achieved, if indeed it's a professional profile. And I throw that out for discussion. I'm reading this, and it's, I understand, I think I understand the intent of this, is to ensure our community knows who's actually helping us and our families. But there's another part of it too, and there's good as well as cautious. There's good as well as not so good. I don't know if that fits. I don't know,
I see some, so we're going to take a brief recess. Senator Yamashita for that bit of information, and I think it's going to lead to something else. On the motion then, the main motion, Senator Rodriguez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I said earlier, I rise in support of this legislation, and I just want to, if we could, add on page 1. It says here, notwithstanding any other provisions of law, the board shall disclose to an inquiring member of the public, and I believe the following was stricken out, but to put a timeline, to give the board a timeline to be able to respond. So, what this says here, as I understand it, is you just walk in and say, I want information on Dr. So-and-so, and they must provide it to you right away. And so, with the constraints that the licensing board has in not having enough resources to maybe to immediately provide that information, I want to put in, if we can ask the legal counsel just to put in where we give them maybe a 4-day time period to be able to respond on the page 1. Line 6, just to add a time frame that the board has to be able to respond to an inquiring member.
And what's the number of days?
I'm thinking the same way as we do with the FOIA request is 4 days, I believe. So we can, was it? Yeah, within 4 days.
Within, okay.
4 working days, yes.
4 working days. On the amendment, no objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
So on the motion then to send Bill 107, no, I'm not, I'm just, every once in a while I repeat so everybody would know what bill we're on. I recognize Senator Frank Blas Jr. Gotcha, girl.
Good one, Madam Speaker. That was fast. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on this piece of legislation. And I agree, and I see where the intent is here and everything. But this, I do recall several sessions ago there was a not similar piece of legislation that was actually debated on this floor, and this is with regards to whether or not it was this whole discussion between prosecution and well, basically it was if I remember correctly, it was prosecution versus conviction. Okay, it's basically not wanting to go against an individual if the judicial process had not been completed. While I agree that the information is necessary and it is good to be able to provide patients with information necessary to make an informed decision about the physician, I'm just a little bit concerned with regards to, more specifically on page 1, lines 11 and 12, with regards to temporary restraining orders issued and interim suspension orders issued. Madam Speaker, there may be processes and maybe times that as a result of disputes and disagreements and whatnot, there may be restraining orders or there may be suspensions, temporary interim suspensions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the individual was, for lack of a better term, guilty of the offense. And so providing that information without giving the individual an opportunity to be able to plead their case and make that process go successfully through may put the unintended consequence to this thing is we may taint the individual when the individual at the end of the process found that there was no, he or she was not, again, for lack of a better term, guilty. But it was held against them, it was put in their professional profile, and was basically held against them, and then it possibly led for a patient to be able to say, well, you know what, maybe I'm not going to trust this doctor or this physician. So I asked the body and maybe to consider with regards to the temporary restraining orders issued and the interim suspension orders issued, that if we want to keep that there, maybe we should add language there so that the restraining order was as a result of a judgment. or the suspension was as a result of a judgment, and the action, and this was action that was taken because it already had gone through that adjudication process. And that, before we move on, I'd like for that to be considered, because if it passes, it, again, as a concern that was brought up by a previous speaker to this legislation, it may be too broad, and we may need to tighten that up a little bit. So if I can ask just for a little recess to talk to the author.
We're going to
see how
take
it
a
goes.
brief recess. The legislature is back in session. Senator Blush, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to have that recess so that, and thank you to both legal counsels for being able to provide some guidance in this. And as a result of discussion with the author of the legislation, and I can see the concern with regards to and why this language was actually put in here, and I guess what we came down to is, and what I'd like to be able to propose is that on line 11 from page 1, we delete the word temporary, so it just reads restraining orders issued.
I'm sorry, Senator, is your mic on?
Yes, ma'am.
Good,
Line
okay.
1, line 11, page 1,
Okay.
delete the word temporary.
Delete the word temporary, so it would say number 1, restraining orders issued.
Yes, ma'am.
So on the amendment, no objections, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. On the motion, the main motion, Senator Manas, Tahir, you're recognized.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I just want to come out and say I support this measure. Our people have every right to know everything there is to know about their physicians and doctors. It's part of ensuring that they are afforded the best possible health care, and having that ability to go and research their doctors. All of the positives will already be available in any form, in advertisements throughout the internet, but not so readily available are the items listed here in this bill. So I think if we give the opportunity and the venue for our people to go and research their doctors and physicians, I think it's a step in the right direction in ensuring that our community gets positive, the best possible health care. We know more about the cars that we drive and the appliances that we have at our house. We could do research on those Carfax and find out, how many accidents the vehicles that we bought have been into, but we can't do the same research for the doctors that we entrust our lives to. So I stand in support of this measure, and I hope that our colleagues also support this measure and pass it in this body. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the motion, are there any other speakers before I recognize the sponsor to close? Senator Munyabard, you're recognized then to close.
Cesar Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to take this time right now to extend my thank yous to my colleagues who shared in their support, and also those who shared in their concerns and tweaking this bill to make it better. And with that being said, Madam Speaker, I wanted to share with this august body that after speaking with my colleague, the good speaker from Barrigada, and making sure that the intent of why we want to make sure that accessibility and information to the patients are being received, that I want to go ahead and proffer an amendment. And if I may, it would be on page 1, line 7. And it would say, the board shall disclose to an inquiring member of the public, which shall include via the internet information. Did I say that right? I'm putting it, okay?
Repeat that again for me, please.
The board inquiring member of the public, which shall include via the internet
Which
information regarding
shall include
via the internet.
via
The internet,
the internet.
Senora.
Oh, so we took that out and now you can bring it back in?
Well, via the internet with the assistance of BIT was taken out. That's still in.
That's still out. So it'll be inquiring member of the public, which shall include information via the internet, information regarding, okay.
Any enforcement action, yes.
All right. On that amendment, Senator Yamashita, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just that as you did that, there was another amendment that was made, and that was the within 4 days clause. That's still there. Okay.
That will still be kept in, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Senator Yamashita.
Okay.
Yes.
So on the amendment,
No objection.
no objections, so ordered.
And Madam Speaker, thank you again to my colleagues for sharing with me and hoping that, I'm hopeful that, I hope my colleagues will support this effort, as we know that the good senator from Cañada Barragata who spoke about how we receive information on other things, it should be just as important that our patients through this Information Act shall be given the information from their physicians, finding out that their physicians' information so that they can better decide for themselves whether they need to work with their physician or not. So with that being said, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I thank my colleagues for supporting this measure. Si Diyos masi.
You're welcome. So on the motion to send
Third reading, voting file.
107-31 to the voting file without any objection, so ordered. Bill number 123-31, I recognize the author, Senator Cruz, Speaker, Vice Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to move Bill 123-31 to the third reading file and ask for a short opportunity to discuss the bill.
You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The bill really is a very short amendment that is on the second page. You'll note that all I added was, and the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority. The law already currently requires that employers or their agents shall not purchase repatriation transportation of a non-immigrant temporary worker without obtaining the exit clearance of the Department of Labor. I just added, and the Guam Hospital Authority. The reason I did that, Madam Speaker, is because I received, pursuant to a Freedom of Information request, what I provided to all of you on your desk, a listing from the department, from Guam Memorial Hospital, of over almost $500,000 worth of outstanding medical bills that the Guam Memorial Hospital was had to to absorb, because these employees who were brought in by their employers, at least that's how I assumed that they were brought in by their employees, because that's how the name of the company was listed with the employee. The name of the employee was redacted for HIPAA reasons, but the employer, as the person responsible for the charges, did not make good on their obligation to the hospital authority, and consequently, the hospital authority lost almost $500,000 there. And so this was introduced at the time that the buildup was still going forward, and I wanted to make sure that going forward, when and if we have more H-2 laborers here, before they're allowed to exit, that their employers or their agents have to clear with Guam Memorial Hospital Authority. This is not intrusive, Madam Speaker. All of our employees have, at the end of their employment with us, have to go and clear with Guam Memorial Hospital Authority. Some of them have to go to the library, DPW, GWA. And so this is not anything new that's required of anybody. It is just to make sure that people don't leave without paying their bills. And all I'm trying to assure is to protect the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority in the future. When we have 20,000, 30,000 H-2 laborers, I don't want them leaving with an even greater outstanding balance owed to the hospital authority, and thereby having the people of Guam have to absorb that. So I ask my colleagues, it's a very, very simple amendment, adding 5 words, and the Guam, 6, and the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority. I ask for my colleagues' support in this very simple bill, and I thank you for this opportunity, and I thank the chair for having prepared the committee report and conducted the hearing in a timely fashion.
On the motion, Senator Palacios, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment. It's very critical. As we all know, I think the calculation of collection on delinquent accounts is, I think, 26 cents to $1. And I look at figure here of 93,000. There's a figure for 47,000. You're talking about big money owed by big companies, and sometimes names are repeated. So I wonder really, a particular name here that's been repeated, I think 5 times or 10 times, what it will amount to. This definitely will monitor and make sure that somehow this has to be worked out. But because all these temporary workers are brought in by these employers, who actually should be responsible for the medical expenses, medical costs that incurred by these temporary workers. So I think this requirement for clearance with GMH will result in something that would improve probably the collection of what is owed that eventually would have to be absorbed by the people of Guam. So I rise in support of this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator Palacios. Senator Respicia on the motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I certainly rise in full support to Bill number 123. You know, as the chairman of the Committee on Rules, I could have easily referred this bill to our good senator colleague who has oversight over the Guam Memorial Hospital. But instead, I chose to refer it to me as chair of the Department of Labor to force this legislature and this government to address this as a policy decision as to whether or not these contractors should be liable for their employees who get injured on the job, get ill, or in some way, somehow is requiring the service of the Guam Memorial Hospital. And so we did conduct a public hearing, and there was a lot of support for this bill, Madam Speaker, and I'm rise to say that you know, this information that the Vice Speaker has given to us in response to a Freedom of Information Act shows that there are some companies, construction companies here on Guam that are owing the Guam Memorial Hospital in the thousands. And I think that we should make this list available publicly. Maybe, hopefully, I'm wondering, maybe they don't know that they have a bill owed to the Guam Memorial Hospital. I hope that's the case. I hope that if they do become aware that they are owing the Guam Memorial Hospital, that they do whatever they can to make arrangements to pay this debt owed to GMH. Madam Speaker, as the previous speaker pointed out, there's a company that owes $93,000. You know, and when we hear of our contractors through the Contractors Association of Guam saying that we need the military buildup because it's going to be a big, big benefit for our community, all of our contractors are hungry for this kind of military activity. And then even without the buildup right now, and you see what kind of impact this has on the local community when people get injured or get ill and have to go to GMH, then they leave GMH when not paying GMH. What does that do for the overall community? And so this Bill 123 is only the beginning of what we need to do to make sure that any kind of construction activity would not result in negatively impacting our healthcare services here on the island. We've heard our military chair express this, including as well the author of this bill, say that we need to pause for a moment and understand what the broader implications are to having this kind of massive military buildup without addressing the healthcare requirements of these foreign workers that are going to come to Guam. We're not anti-foreign worker, Madam Speaker, or at least I, for one, is not against importing foreign workers to supplement a job here on Guam that cannot be filled by local. But when we have a situation where these construction companies are importing these off-island hires and not even taking the responsibility to make sure that whatever amounts are owed to GMH are not remitted, you know, I say shame on them. And I say shame on the Contractors Association for not following through with their members to make sure that these kinds of obligations are owed to GMH. And I say shame on them for shaming us who stand up to question what this military buildup impact will have if this kind of component is not addressed. And so this information is available for public dissemination. And I hope again that those owing GMH make some kind of payments, or maybe I'm hoping that GMH through the collection efforts garnish or withhold some of their own resources so this money can be paid to our Guam Memorial Hospital. And I thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me an opportunity to rise in support of the bill.
You're very welcome, Senator Respicio. Next, we have on the, to speak on the main motion is Speaker Wampat and then Senator Blas. So Speaker Wampat, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to speak. You know, I realized that the Vice Speaker had mentioned that there was a very minor amendment to this existing legislation. But I have a question, really, and a concern as well, because when I was reading at least the very first part of this Section 1, on page 1, the very first paragraph where it says it's unlawful for a non-immigrant temporary worker to report to work prior to obtaining a work permit, and that this work permit, of course, card must constitute that, you know, the work, a work permit, and also to be renewed upon approval of importation, transfer, extension of non-immigrant temporary workers. And I'm just wondering, and I'd like to ask the question, if the Vice Speaker can respond to my question, because, and the question is that all of these companies, and we have a list of these companies, and as I was going through the listing, we see that there are some of these companies who have employees that have been injured, and there's one I know with about 19 treatment, I guess, or injuries maybe, and for one particular company, and then for others, you know, you'll find 3 or 4. And I'm just wondering, just like, you know, anything that we do in the island here is that if you have a debt and you don't pay your debt, then it's very difficult for somebody to say to you again that, you know, I'm going to allow you to continue. I mean, not for the hospital to say and reject these individuals, but to reject some of these companies who are requesting for additional H2 workers when they have outstanding balances with the hospital. And that, I think, is a critical area, because these are individuals that we surely don't want to be injured or be killed on the job. But more importantly, somebody has to take responsibility for them, and it is these companies. So the question to the Vice Speaker, and I know I've gone around here, is that has he considered the possibility of and inquiring whether it's possible to not allow for the renewal of applications or the granting of these applications for additional H2 workers when they have an outstanding balance with the hospital?
Vice Speaker Cruz, would you care to answer?
I would be honored to yield to the question, Madam Speaker. I did introduce Bill number 49-31, and it was co-sponsored by the good Chairman of Health, Senator Rodriguez. And its intent was to revoke the business license of any contractor who has failed to live up to their financial responsibilities to the hospital. I can't remember if that had a hearing or whether or not the public artwork was so great that the committee that it was referred to did not conduct a hearing, or whether or not after the hearing it was shelved. But there is a bill in the hopper, Bill number 49, that I introduced long before this one, where I was proposing to revoke the license of any contractor that had outstanding obligations to the hospital. But that has not made it to the floor. And if they want, I would love to be able to move that back to the floor at some point.
Speaker Wampat, does that answer your question?
Yes, it really did. And I thank him very much for introducing the bill. And I guess maybe we need to find out exactly where it is. But I think we also need to take it a step further, because This is with revenue and taxation by revoking their license then to operate. I think that there should be another stronger message to send to them too, is that you won't be able, I mean, no, you won't have a license, you won't be able to bring them in, but we should be able to pull the Department of Labor in as well, and Department of Labor should be sending out this information to all contractors or anyone wanting to bring in H2 workers, that these individuals are their responsibility, and that if they want to continue to bring them in, that they also must make sure that other than providing for shelter, food and clothing, you know, and a job, of course, and paying them, but making sure that, you know, they get the medical treatment as well. So I think that the combination of both, not just the Department of Labor, but revenue tax in the revocation of their licenses would send out a very strong message that, you know, that we're taking this very seriously, and that they must as well, if they want to continue to do business here in Guam. I do support Bill 123, and I just want to congratulate, of course, the Vice Speaker for you know, actually doing this and also preparing, I think, for, you know, the possible military buildup. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Speaker Wonpat. Next to speak on the main motion, Senator Frank Blas. Bro, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, sis. You know, Madam Speaker, I rise in support. Not only do I rise in support of Bill 123-31, but it also calls into question a concern that I guess, and in speaking to the author of the legislation, we may not necessarily be able to fit in this legislation because it is very specific to where it goes, and as far as the statute under the mandatory registration of non-immigrant temporary workers. But this whole concern of this new, all this other phenomena that's occurring as a result of this impending military buildup or this the increased economic structure that we have in Guam, and that is the influx or bringing in of workers that don't come in from these or not necessarily have the H2 designation. You know, I think, Madam Speaker, you can attest, and you've seen that there's many companies that have been bringing in their employees or other employees to work in their companies from areas that don't require their workers to have H2 to have the H2 requirements. Talking about those employees that are coming in from off island, from elsewhere within the United States. Just as much as we're concerned, and I'm sure that we can probably start to look and ask the Guam Memorial Hospital for a similar listing for those individuals that come from these other companies. And you know, Madam Speaker, as they bring in these other employees, these workers to work in these areas, as much as we're concerned about the H2, these companies have the ability to be able to send back these employees back to their home of residence, somewhere probably in the continental United States, and then we have this whole dilemma again. So, you know, I guess in the discussion that I've had with the good chair or the good author of this is looking into also legislation if it's not possible to amend this here to include those, and it doesn't appear that it could be, because again it's specific, is having to address, you know, that other classification of workers who are not H2, who are not necessarily residents of the island, who come in from those other areas, brought in by these companies to do the work and then sent back. Some of these individuals may get the services of the Guam Memorial Hospital and then send back. What about those bills? What about those payments that we're not able to recoup? I think we should also look into that area. So I stand in support of this piece of legislation. This legislation also helps to spur some other discussion, and may hopefully, and looking into other legislation that I'm already starting to look into, to be able to bolster this and to strengthen this, to look at the other classification of workers that we have in this industry. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome, Senator Blas. Are there anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion. Speaker Ben Pangilinan, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this proposed legislation, and certainly want to kind of set in perspective what we're looking at with regards to the military buildup and the promises, both kept and broken, that have been made on how this military buildup will affect us, and what we have incorporated in our planning with regards to this military buildup. When the military buildup was first planned, the health care of the H-2 workers was originally supposed to be taken care of by the military. There was a plan in the preliminary program in which even the residents would be on base. When General Leaf and General Bice first came and then tried to sell the military buildup to the community and the positive effects on it, they said that the impact was going to be low on the community because they were actually going to house these H-2 workers on base, maybe in tents or whatever, temporary housing, and that they would then be responsible for their medical care. And then, of course, they used the fact that, well, some members of our business community said, well, no, we want to benefit from the buildup, so let us provide the housing and let us provide the medical care and let them be part of the community. And some of us stood up and said, maybe we shouldn't do that, because what are the effects going to be on the resources that we have, and what resources are we going to get in order to help with the cost to our own departments and agencies? And of course, the administration began trying to quantify those costs. But all of a sudden it shifted from being housed on base to being housed off base, from medical care being provided by the military contractor and the military itself on base using their resources to, we're going to put them out in our community. And that was supposed to be a good thing. And now what do we see? We see now just a small slice of what's going to occur. Now, we just recently completed the budget, Madam Speaker, and when you look at the proposal that the administration presented on the budget and the effects of the military buildup, even though they have reduced, they say, the impact of the military with regards to the positive effects of it, and they've discounted from an overly inflated number in the first place. And so even with the discount that they did, the fact that we're going to get maybe $63 million in military buildup revenue in the next 3 years is just not there. It doesn't work. But even more important is that while they have accounted for the additional revenues for the military buildup, when you look at the expense line, they did not account for the additional expense. And this is just a small slice of what 20,000, 30,000, whatever that final number is, of H-2 workers that we'll have on our community and the infrastructure and resources we have. We already know that this impact to Guam Memorial Hospital, Madam Speaker, is only on about 2,800 at the peak so far. We're down to like 1,800 now. This is the impact that 1,800 workers have on the hospital. What would the impact be on 20,000? 8 million? 10 million? And none of that is figured out in the expense side that was projected by the administration in trying to determine what we can be looking forward to 10 years from now. It doesn't account for the impact on the police department or the Guam Fire Department or public health, on the impact. And we're only looking at H2. The retiring speaker just mentioned the impact that we're not measuring on workers that are not H2 but access these resources and are not able to meet their obligation. That's another what? 5 million? 10 million? So we really have to be very careful when we look at this and try to make sure. Just look at, we're having a grand opening of a village workforce that we saw in the paper, the announcement, that's supposed to be originally able to handle 20,000, maybe up to 40,000. They're in their first phase of expansion, and I'm not sure of what the capacity is in this first phase. But that same company is in here owing $93,000 to the hospital, I think. So their plan is, of course, to put in a medical clinic up there. But this is for care at the hospital, emergent care. Are they equipped to handle the same type of bill here that is $93,000 at their clinic? Or did these people go to the hospital because they needed emergency care and hospitalization? So I think we have to be, once again, very careful when we look at what this all means to our community and the numbers that are being thrown out there in terms of the economic benefits of this buildup without taking a look at this corresponding economic cost. And there are many, many examples of where the projections are deficient in terms of accounting for those costs and overly optimistic in accounting for the economic benefits to the community. What's also a little troubling for me here is that most of these people are being listed as self-pay. Why would somebody who is working for a company be self-pay? And what are these? Are these individuals coming to the hospital on their own? Is it a work injury? Is it they're not feeling good at night and so they leave the barracks and go to the hospital ER room? Because you have another category that says work. So I think we need to even take a look even closer at what type of care is being given and how are we classifying these individuals. And we really shouldn't have anybody that comes into this community as an H2 worker in which the employer vouches for the individual in terms of his housing and his health care and then be classified as self-pay. It wouldn't make sense. So we need to look at that once again and bill the companies if they in fact are supposed to be providing these coverages. And so, Madam Speaker, I think this move will allow, I just don't understand though what the effect would be on trying to place the responsibility on the worker. So are we now going to have somebody who's not going to be able to leave because the company's not paying the bill? I think and I think the good speaker or vice speaker maybe has that other solution to this 90% solution, and that is the responsibility has to be borne by the company that has vouched for the individual that it brings in. And maybe the business license aspect is the way to go with regards to if these individuals send their people to the hospital, don't pay the bill, that it's not that the individual can't go home because maybe they want to stay here. Maybe that's the best thing that's going to happen. But it's the company that's responsible. We must find an incentive or a program that will ensure that these companies meet their responsibilities to the hospital for their employees. And so I look forward to the other bill that's been introduced. I will read the bill itself. I must admit I have not read that bill in its entirety. And then try to develop, as we all are trying to, integrated solutions that attack the problem from the different avenues that place the burden on the hospital and our own local resources. So I certainly commend the author for his continued diligence in focusing on this area to try and ensure that the military expansion on Guam will not be on the backs of the people of Guam. Thank you, and Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker.
Mr. Vice Speaker?
Just a quick point of information, Madam Speaker. I hope I didn't misspeak earlier, but my bill number 49 was to have the Contractors License Board not renew the contractor's license.
Oh, it was contractors, not
Because
not
that
government
is
tax.
even more punitive. If you can't be a contractor, that's going to cost you quite a bit.
Senator Guthridge, you're recognized on the main motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I want to congratulate the sponsor of the bill for his effort to try to close some of the loops that certainly will come when the military buildup begins in terms of ensuring that companies take responsibility for the workers that they bring to Guam. I'd like to share with you the fact that in all of the discussions that I have had, and I'm sure other of my colleagues have had, with our military friends representing the Department of Defense on the military buildup, including the JIGPO office, we've always been assured that for military contracts that are let for facilities paid for by DOD or Japanese contributed money to the Department of Defense, for those projects that a condition of the contract will be to provide health coverage for the workers that are brought to Guam. Now that's something they've always committed to doing. It's something they said they're going to build into their contracts between the Department of Defense to the NAVFAC office and the contractors. Of course, we do not know, in fact, if that has occurred to date for those contracts that have been let. But that's the assurances that we've been given by General Bice and others. But I'm very pleased that our dear Vice Speaker, regardless of that, is still going to do other things by local law to ensure that the people of Guam are not left holding the financial burden of subsidizing the workers that are brought here from outside. In addition, I want to share with you that in meetings held with officials of the Philippine government directly involved with the sending of workers from the Philippines abroad, including Guam, plan to participate in military buildup contracts as part of the labor pool if the Guam labor pool cannot be sufficient. In all of our discussions with Philippine officials, we have impressed upon them that in the contracts that they review, coming from companies on Guam or elsewhere in support of the military buildup construction projects, that the Philippine government itself must ensure that those contracts provide for health protections for their citizens. So that once they get on a plane and they get off that plane, they know that if a citizen of theirs working for a company here, whether it's a Guam company or a foreign company or a U.S. mainland company, that they will be covered. Again, we can't tell a foreign government what to do, but we have impressed upon officials of the Department of Labor, the overseas workers' offices of the Philippine government, and other entities involved in the approval and certification of their workers to work abroad, particularly on Guam, that they have this included in the contracts that they approve on behalf of their workers. Senator Spiegel is very aggressive about this. I've been aggressive about this. I'm sure others in this room have been aggressive about this. But regardless of that, we have a responsibility through our own law-making body to develop assurances of our own, to make it clear to contractors involved in any of the build-up projects for the military, meet the responsibilities that they should have for their workers. They should not try and quote-unquote pawn off the health needs of their workers to the Guam Memorial Hospital or to other government entities and expect the people of Guam to pay for that. We cannot afford that. And that is unethical. I also want to share with you, to give you an idea of how important this is, and just how unknown some of these factors are. I want to share with you something else. You know, we've been focusing on the build-up projects, and we know that the anticipation is, and based on our projections, that a lot of workers are going to be hired here, a lot of workers are going to be brought from other places. But we have to anticipate also on local projects, Madam Speaker, projects that technically are not build-up related because they're not funded by the Department of Defense, they're not funded by Japanese money given to the Department of Defense. But these are projects entered into by investors who look at opportunities, as Speaker said, Vice Speaker said, and want to build facilities, want to build things because they see an opportunity. We have to ensure that those contractors as well are covered by this bill. Any contractor registered with the Guam Contractors Association should be subject to this requirement. And I'd like to ask our Vice Speaker to look at this, to ensure that, in fact, this bill does that. If it's not in this bill, then the next bill should do that. So that all contractors involved have responsibilities for their foreign workers, whether they are directly involved in build-up projects or in investment projects or speculative projects that seek to take advantage of economic opportunities related to the build-up. Now, I want to share a letter with you all that I received today relevant to this subject from the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Jacqueline Planchestill. You know, Assistant Secretary Jacqueline and I have been exchanging letters for some time now on the build-up. And I write to her constantly to try to stay on top of things and get information. And I received this letter from her today. It's dated August 11th. And she says, "Dear Senator Guthers, thank you for your letter of June 29th and July 5th, 2011, known as the Guthers Build-Up Documents 22 and 23. I am in writing in response to those two letters. In conjunction with the environmental impact statement that you inquired about, our planners developed a draft Guam Joint Military Master Plan that was reflected in the record of decision." We've all been asking, what has happened to the draft Guam Military Build-Up Master Plan? The Guam Joint Military Master Plan is a planning document that lays out proposed locations of facilities and infrastructure for the military realignment. Since the time that the record of decision was signed in September 2011, multiple factors have emerged that could affect the realignment as originally planned. Now listen to this. This is a first statement that we have received from a high-level Pentagon official telling us about potential changes. This is a DOD official, telling us about potential changes for the military buildup. She says, since the time of the record of decision was signed in September 2010, multiple factors have emerged that could affect the realignment as originally planned. Budgetary constraints, Senator Ben just talked about that. Congressional concerns, and the acknowledgement that the 2014 target completion date will not be met are all likely to affect the pace and sequencing of construction projects. Additionally, the Department of the Navy's commitment to a quote-unquote net negative footprint is expected to require adjustments to land use plans. Listen to this statement again. She says, additionally, the Department of the Navy's commitment to a net negative footprint is expected to require adjustments to land use plans. Because the Government Accountability Office, and they were here recently and I met with them, is tasked with auditing the federal government, we provided a draft copy of the master plan as statutorily required. They never provided us with a copy. However, they gave a copy to the GAO very recently. However, all of the issues mentioned above, meaning the budgetary constraints, congressional concerns, and the acknowledgement that the 2014 target completion date will not be met, all of those issues significantly affect our planning and preclude the Department of Defense, they're finally admitting this, precludes the Department of Defense from finalizing a master plan at this time. For this reason, a master plan has not been released. Although it may not reflect the current state of play and potential future adjustments, we are willing to discuss with you the draft Guam Joint Military Master Plan that is associated with the decisions memorialized in the Record of Decision. Because I've been asking her to see the draft plan so we can give our input. She says, I appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts on this issue. I will continue to try to work with you and your colleagues. Madam Speaker, this sort of reinforces what the former speaker, Speaker Ben, was saying regarding the budgetary issues. It indicates to us now that even the Department of Defense is acknowledging that there are changes afoot, big changes afoot for the buildup. And that they do not have a final master plan. They have a draft plan that has to be changed. Tomorrow I'm going to try to make a call to the Assistant Secretary and see how we can work this through on the availability of this draft master plan. But I think it's important that even during this quote-unquote lull period, that we close all the loops. And that is what Senator Cruz is doing with his bill, trying to close the loops, particularly with reference to health services for temporary workers that still may be needed here, maybe not in the giant numbers as originally projected, but certainly will still be needed here. And so I commend him for his bill, and I think all of us should continue to be proactive on this matter. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome, Senator Cutharts. Anyone else wishing to speak on Vice Speaker Cruz's main motion? If not, Vice Speaker, do you wish to close?
I just want to thank all my colleagues for their very eloquent support of the bill. It embarrasses me as the sponsor that everybody else was more passionate about the bill than I was. But I thank all of my colleagues for their support, and I hope that with the motion to move this to the voting file that I will get your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. On that motion to have Bill number 123-31 moved to the voting file, no objections, motion carries. We are now on the next bill, which is Bill number 132-31 LS. Speaker Ben Pangilinan, you're, oh wait, Speaker? Speaker Pangilinan, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to move that Bill 132-31 be placed in the third reading file. I'd like to just briefly discuss the bill.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, while many of the bills are asking us to do some things, this bill is asking us not to do something. And it basically is in the former time when the military was planning its exit on Guam, its base contracting operations, its A-76 downsizing, and other changes to the military structure on Guam, military was offering its operations to off-island contractors. And in order to entice these off-island contractors to work with our local contractors, the Guam legislature decided to enact legislation that would make tax breaks available really for this off-island contractors. And, you know, it was kind of even back then we had some concerns about it because what it meant was we were going to be subsidizing federal operations on base by giving tax and QC certificates to these base operating contracts, most especially in the integration of the water system. And at this time, I think that given where we're moving on the military expansion and so forth, it just doesn't make sense for our local government to grant QCs to federal contractors in which the federal government, you know, will benefit from reduced cost, and we really haven't seen the benefit to our local community and our local businesses. So this bill would just repeal the authorization for rebates of income received by military contractors on the base operating contracts that the federal government issues. So it just removes that from the books and preserves our tax base really for operations of the military bases on Guam.
Si Diyos Masi, Speaker Ben. Anyone wishing to speak on Bill number 32-31, 132-31? If not, can we, any objections, Speaker? Move to third reading voting file? No objections, motion carries. Now we have next Senator we're gonna take a 1-minute recess. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, The next bill up on the agenda is Bill number 136-31 LS, and I'm going to go ahead and recognize Senator Manas Vataran. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to move to accept the Bill 136 as substituted by the Committee on Public Safety, Law Enforcement, and Judiciary.
Motion to place. Motion to place.
And motion to place it in the third
Third
reading
reading,
file.
you would like to speak on it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill deals with video screens in a motor vehicle. And, with as technology progresses, we're seeing that these video screens are now being placed in vehicles and installed in the front seat viewing area where the driver is. And what we found is that this increases the risk and distracts the drivers while they are on the roadway. And it's especially hazardous when the driver is watching the video while he or she is driving on the roads. So it's our intent in this bill to prohibit the use of video monitors being on while the vehicle is in motion. Simply put, the bill will make it illegal to watch TV while driving. In the public hearing, we saw the Guam Police Department and the Fire Department come forward and support this measure. Their point was that the leading cause of many of the accidents on Guam deal with distracted driving. We've seen some bills that have been introduced in this body that deal with distracted driving, prohibiting such things as texting while driving. And as technology progresses, like I've said, we have other electronic devices that take our attention off the roadways. I do know that there are some other measures that will be introduced that could make it illegal to use your cell phone while driving. That bill has not yet been introduced. So this is just a mechanism to make Guam's roads more safe by prohibiting the use of video monitors by the drivers while the vehicle is in motion. Now, the monitors were really installed in the cars to allow parents and people to entertain their children in the back seat during long travels on the roadways. But we found that these video monitors are now being placed in the front seat so that the drivers are watching the videos and other videos while they're driving. So what this bill does would make it illegal to do so, and for those found in violation, it would impose a $100 fine. There are some exemptions, though, that are stipulated in this bill. It deals mostly with informational displays, GPS, and of course, emergency vehicles, which are fitted with these video monitors. Those are necessary for their law enforcement duties, so those would be exempted. And so I urge my colleagues to support this bill and do our part to make Guam's roads safer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Mana. Anyone else wishing to speak on this bill? No one wishing to speak on this bill? I'll move it to Speaker Wampat. Speaker Wampat, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I know that the senator was listing some of the exemptions, but is there anything here basically that would these new vehicles that are now on sale that actually, I mean, sure it has a mapping display, but it actually includes for a Bluetooth, and would that be then a violation as well here? If she would be kind enough to respond to my question.
Okay, not necessarily Bluetooth. It doesn't identify that in here, but there are certain things that are allowable in the vehicles, such as programs that allow you to see what's going on, the activity around your car, and make it so that when you reverse, you can see what's behind you. Other things like GPS and global locationing and mapping.
Okay. So that's not then included.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a Bluetooth technology that plays video. Oh, no. Not that I know of.
You'd be surprised.
You never know.
I'm sure that the moment we're speaking, one is being
It's called
invented
Skyping.
right now. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
I guess Skyping would also be included in some of the prohibition.
Speaker Wampat, thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Tyrone, for answering her question. I think I see Senator Gutherd's hand up. Is that a hand raised, Senator Gutherd's?
Madam Speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we can have Senator Gutherd share her
Thank you. You know, I've been thinking about this for some time, and when I first heard about Senator Amana's bill, and I began to ask myself, have I ever seen anyone in the front seat of a car moving, watching a movie, or watching TV? And my answer is no, I have not. I have seen people with monitors in their dashboard or their visors waiting for someone watching a movie or watching TV maybe, but not while traveling. I'm just wondering, Madam Speaker, if we are going too far. Are we going too far and intruding too much? And telling people how to behave, how to act, how to conduct themselves, how to equip their vehicles. Are we telling car dealers and car importers and electronic companies that specialize in this equipment, don't put it in the vehicles that you order that come to Guam in the front, or don't install it here aftermarket to those that want to put it in? Because if they get into trouble, you might be implicated, you know, similar to the bar situation when a bar serves a drink and the person had too much to drink and then you get in an accident and then the bar sued as well as the person civilly. I know the senator means well. Her previous bill dealing with the writing in the back of the pickup is a good example of that, to protect children. But now we're sort of talking about adults. I have a feeling that the next bill will be you can't eat in the car when you're moving, or you can't smoke when you're moving. I don't know. I have seen a lot of young people, school students, maybe in high school, college, that take great pride in styling their vehicles. And sometimes you see them parked at the Agana Boat Basin area on the weekends, or on Marine Drive, Oceanside on the weekends, you know, showing their cars to folks that come over. And some of them have these monitors on, people could see, or one fellow even has a giant TV in the back of his vehicle he built into the car that he upgraded. But these folks, you know, they have a lot of common sense, and I think they're smart enough to know that they shouldn't be watching this in the front seat when they're moving. Now, this bill, of course, would say that, so you can't do that. I know that's the intent of the bill. I'm just wondering if we have to tell people that you can't do that, that they're not smart enough to know they can't do it. I just put that out there for discussion, for consideration. But there are many people that will be affected by this. Not because they watch something when they're moving in a vehicle, but because they have these things in their cars, and they're going to be scared now. And many of them are going to want to remove them if this becomes law. And I don't know if that's a good thing. I do know it will have an impact on certain sectors of our community that specialize in this, installing this kind of equipment, servicing it, designing it. So I hope we also think about that. Because when we pass something like this, we have to think of the consequences, other than just the individuals that will be affected because they will be prohibited from doing this. But the other side of it, of course, is the economy. Will this have any impact on the economy? If so, what kind of impact? I don't know if anyone's done that research, but if they have, I'd like them to share that with me. Are we going to be putting any people out of business because of this? Are we going to be impacting the car dealers that bring the vehicles in, that maybe offer these options? I ask that, maybe not expecting to get a response, but I ask that for food for thought. Thank you very much. And by the way, I don't own any companies involved in any of this, and I don't have anything like that in my car. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see Tina Rosemary Barnes, Rory Respicio, Palacios, and then Bloss.
That was already there. I'd just like to note to the Vice President, I kept trying to catch the attention of one of the pages in the back, but thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak and rise in support of Bill number 136-31 as authored by the good senator from Cañada Barrigada. Mr. Speaker, when the bill was first introduced, one of the concerns I had was was to know that would it be illegal if the video screens were put on the passenger side or the visor or anywhere in the front panel at all costs. And then I knew that there was when the public hearing was had, the bill as accepted was substituted, and it further stated on the caption that this section would be, a new section would be added to 16 GCA that would be relative to the use of screens in a motor vehicle while in motion or in a lane of traffic. And it talks about, so my question to the good author was, based on the amendment and the substituted version, it is not illegal to put this kind of video screen or a monitor in the front position and as long as you're not in driving position on the driver's side and the vehicle is moving, that is the only time it becomes a violation.
That's right. You know, a lot of times these vehicles come equipped with the video monitors in the vehicle. These, if you even install it into your vehicle, it doesn't have to be removed, so those people, it won't affect them. They don't have to remove it. They just can't use it and watch the video while driving.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Mr. Speaker, as I hear the answer to that and know that one of my other concerns were what about those the devices that were already installed by the factory, and I noted that on page 3, the section on exemptions, but it was crossed out. It said, this section shall not apply to the following equipment operated in a vehicle, and then it shows for global positioning display, a mapping display, a vehicle information display, a visual display used to enhance or supplement the driver's view forward, behind, or to the sides of a motor vehicle, which is for the purpose of maneuvering the vehicle. And then it also talks about the mobile digital terminal. So as I see those provisions are in, and because of that, and my concern about making sure that those who already have these devices and these monitors in the front don't have to remove it. They just can't utilize the display monitors while they're driving, and that's if they're going. They cannot watch TV or cannot watch a movie. But I stand in support of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Barnes. Senator Espicio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this bill. And I understand the concerns expressed by one of our colleagues. But, you know, when they make cars these days, those monitors in the front, you're allowed, Mr. Speaker, if you want to play a DVD, that monitor will show that DVD if the car's on park. But then when the driver starts to put the car on drive or reverse, then that screen cuts off. But I want to commend the author of this bill for her bravery and being kind of proactive here, because, you know, I was off island, Mr. Speaker, in a foreign country, and with that GPS device, you can pick up live TV via satellite. And I shared this with Senator Gutherz, and she got really, really excited, saying, can you imagine if we can watch live programs? So in thinking of this legislation and what may very well be true for the residents of Guam, you know, I even shared with my 6-year-old son when I got back from that trip that from that GPS device they were watching live programming, and RJ thought that we could do that already, and you know, he wanted to watch his program right then and there. But you know, I understand that people think that it's their vehicle, and they have whatever personal responsibilities that they have over that particular vehicle, Mr. Speaker. But it's legislation like this that sets those boundaries to make it abundantly clear that it's not a practice in terms of safety to allow for a driver to be driving while the front screen monitor is showing a DVD. I mean, right now on Guam, you see it all the time where the factory third-party vendors, where they install big screen monitors on the back sides of the car. Those are perfectly fine, but I dread the day where you would have probably a 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-inch monitor in the front seat, and given Senator Guther's ability to just want to do some things like this, I wouldn't put it past our good colleague to install a 20-inch monitor in the front of her car, only to prove us wrong that something like this is entirely possible. And it's because something like this is possible, Mr. Speaker, I rise in full support of the bill.
Thank you very much. Senator Palacios.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the bill as substituted. As the chair of the committee that heard this bill, we gathered testimonies, and the original bill actually, it would have been a violation just to have it in a car, and it also, the original bill did not recognize that there can be an official purpose for the use of monitors, such as police monitoring, I guess, the whatever video equipment that they're using for law enforcement purposes. But the substitute bill, Mr. Speaker, recognizes only a violation if it's if the vehicle is in motion and then the video is on. As long as that video or that monitoring in a private setting is off, if it's on the front seat, then it's not a violation. It has to be in motion or in a travel lane, waiting, of course, for the light. But there's a valid use of this when one is waiting in the parking lot, I guess for a relative to come out of some shopping center, that you can actually turn on and, I guess, entertain yourself and not be bored waiting for this individual to come out. But there's a use for that, and a valid use for that. And also this one, this substitute bill recognized that law enforcement nowadays have the monitoring systems that to monitor computer readout and so forth. It recognizes and provides exception for that. So the substitute bill is a work between public safety officials after the public hearing, and of course the staff from the author of the bill. And I think after subsequent 2-3 markup meetings, we came up with this very good bill, and I hope that my colleagues recognize that it only will be a violation if the vehicle is in motion. Now, if the video is on the back side behind the driver, it can be on for the passenger at the back side to watch, and it would not be a violation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for that clarification and for the good work in the substitute bill. Senator Blas, did you wish to be recognized?
Actually, Mr. Speaker, question asked and answered already with regards to the concern brought up by the good lady from Judy. Where do you stay at now? Okay, it's been asked, but I do support the measure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other senator wish to be heard on the bill? Senator Pangilinan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I certainly listened intently to the chairman of the committee and the work that's gone into trying to find a medium ground on this thing from the original submission of the bill to what we have before us today. And I stand in favor of it. I certainly, now understand that, I need a new car. I can't believe all the things that are available in the cars, and not a single one of those things is in my car. My handbrake don't work. So I do want to say that I think it's very important. It's when it's in use that will distract the driver from paying attention to the roads. And there are many other issues of distracted driving, but I don't want to give anybody any additional ideas. So I do stand in support of the bill. I think it recognizes the car owners and how they want to treat their vehicle, but it's only when they use their vehicle and they are doing other things than paying attention to their driving, in which we as a public have a right to govern their behavior so we don't endanger any of the other people using our public roadways. And I think this accomplishes that, and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Pangilinan. Any other senator wish to be heard on the bill? If not, the author can close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say that laws are in place to protect the responsible drivers as well as the irresponsible. And while we do want to legislate we don't feel we have to legislate common sense. Sometimes we do. And in fact, the previous speaker has introduced legislation that tells people to feed their dogs, and that's common sense as well. So we hope that most people have the common sense. The previous. She didn't want to tell us where she lives. So we hope that people have common sense to do things that are safe and safe for the community. This legislation will make Guam's roads safe, and I urge my colleagues to please support it. Thank you.
On the motion to place the bill in the voting file, is there an objection? Hearing no objection. Thank you, Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I move that we revert to motions.
Any objection to reverting to motions?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's been a request by yourself and the Speaker to place at the top of the second reading file Bill 161, and it's an act to amend 17 GCA 27003 relative to the removal of members of the Guam Commission on Educator Certification. We've been told that this is a time-sensitive piece of legislation. So,
Any objection to placing
and a
161?
committee report has been filed for some time now, and copies of the bill have been made and distributed.
Any objection to placing 161 at the top? None.
My next motion, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to report that the committee, Senator Palacios' committee, had a public hearing on 3 nominations last night, and I move to place the appointment of Mr. Ignacio Ike Pangilinan and Kevin Smith to the legislative concurrence file for the positions of the parole board.
Any objection to placing the appointments of the two nominees to the parole board?
And my last motion is to, again, I'm pleased to report on behalf of Senator Palacios and his committee the successful filing of a committee report on the nomination of a Superior Court Judge nominee, James L. Canto II, to the legislative concurrence file.
Any objection to placing that in the voting, on the second reading file?
And I then move, notwithstanding the House rules, that we go to the legislative concurrence file, Mr. Speaker, so I can move these three nominees accordingly. So we go to the legislative concurrence file, and then I'll make the motion to move them to the voting file.
For right now.
It's already in the concurrence file? On the voting file? Okay, so my next motion is that we revert back to second reading.
On the motion, revert to second reading.
And I move then that we, given that Speaker Wampat is preparing for a public hearing this evening, I move that we recess till 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
On the motion to recess until 9, hearing no objection. We'll recess until 9 tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.